Good morning. Welcome
Good.
to Mornings with Michael, the weekend edition. We're going to have a weekend update on the markets tomorrow, but we got a special opportunity today. We got a special guest I want to introduce everybody to. Um, we do not have any investment to talk about today, so we don't have to have the standard. This is only for information or educational purposes, but this is for entertainment purposes today. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Steve Taddei. Steve has been an icon of Alameda for a long time. He grew up in Alameda. He works for Ocean Breeze Pharmacy. He's in Toastmasters and he's a leader in podcasting. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce Steve, and I'd love to ask you, Steve. You know, it looks like you have a sales career that used to work with Dick's Sporting Goods, and from the financial sector, Dick's Sporting Goods is announcing their earnings next week.
Okay. I work for Dick's, and they are a great retail sporting goods store. And I worked there for 6 months, and I left on good terms. They're a great company, but I found a job in my profession, which I've been in medical sales for my whole career, and it was a move that was very important for me to make. But I have great feelings about Dick's Sporting Goods.
Well, that's awesome. I know you have a big sports softness in your heart, as you've had podcasts on the Oakland Raiders, the Oakland Athletics, and some of the other areas. So, yeah, first I wanted to ask you, I met you in Toastmasters. How did you get into Toastmasters, Steve?
It was about 2008. I had been in sales. I had been working for Teva Pharmaceuticals. They were the company I worked for. At that time, it was for about 21 years. And I wanted to improve the way I communicated with my customers. And I thought Toastmasters was a great place to go. And that's exactly what I found out, that it helped me with my communication skills. But I also found out that Toastmasters is an incredible organization with a lot of people with a lot of different passions and talents. There were a lot of salespeople like me, but there were also people in IT that were absolutely geniuses at what they do for a living, but they wanted to improve the way they communicated with the sales department and the training department so their ideas would get exposure throughout the company. And then there were people from different parts of the world, new Americans, who wanted to improve their English because English was their second language. So there were just all kinds of different people at Toastmasters, and it's been real educational for me, not only in communication, but in learning about different people, different cultures, and different ideas.
That's awesome. Say, without any further ado, I'd love to, maybe you could introduce some of the things you got on your background there. It looks like maybe you got some sports memorabilia, maybe some awards. Maybe you could just describe that.
Okay.
You got an Oakland Raiders helmet, is that it?
I don't have a helmet. What I have back here, maybe this is what looks like a helmet from a distance.
Yes.
This is my San Francisco Giants stuffed animal.
Okay.
So that's that. Right here, I've got Willie Mays on Life magazine in 1958 when the Giants came to San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
The Oakland A's winning the World Series in 1989. That was the Earthquake Series. Rickey Henderson going into the Hall of Fame. Another newspaper article about the Bay Bridge Series. That was the Earthquake Series with the A's and the Giants. This is when President Obama was first, he took office in 2009. And that July, he wanted to go to the All-Star game with Willie Mays.
Oh,
So
wow.
this is Willie and President Obama getting off Air Force One when they got into, I think it was St. Louis for the All-Star game. And I just love saving things. I've got different plaques up there, not only for me. This is my friend Joe Williams. He's like an adopted uncle. And it's a recognition he got for being president of the Alameda Golf Club. And I just like to have different pictures on the wall on
So,
different things.
so Steve, you grew up in Alameda,
I lived here all my life.
and I've seen you had a few postings about the Oakland Raiders. Have you ever met when you were growing up? Had you ever met any of the Raiders stars when you're around town?
Oh, the Raider stars were amazing because Alameda is right next to Oakland. And back in the day, in the 1960s and 70s, a lot of players on the A's, the Warriors, and the Raiders lived in Alameda because it was really close to the Oakland Coliseum. And they were part of the community. There was no ESPN. There were no cell phones where if somebody was walking around town, you could take a picture of them and then post it on TMZ completely out of context. So they were part of the community. We'd see them in the grocery store. We'd see them on the golf course. We'd see them in church. And in fact, when I was in high school, a lot of the girls at Alameda High would babysit for the Raider families. If like Ray Guy was one of them, Mark Van Egan was another one, they'd go out to dinner with their spouse, and then the neighborhood girls would babysit when they were about 16 years old or whatever. So they were really part of the community, and we'd run into them. Art Toms, a defensive lineman for the A's, owned a laundromat on Park Street in San Jose, and Fred Bolitnikoff owned a saloon, and they were part of the community.
Oh, that's amazing. So, how you inspired me, Steve, to get into podcasting and kind of watch your growth in that. Maybe you can just explain to everybody how you got into podcasting, and then we could go in and talk about what you're focusing on now with your podcast.
Sure. Podcasting changed everything, just in general. Michael, you and I are old enough to where, if we drove around the car, would you listen to the car radio?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And every once in a while, something would be going on. Somebody would be interviewed, or the host would say, in 1 hour, we are going to interview this person. And you're thinking, that's great. I want to hear that. Except I've got an appointment in an hour, and there's no way I can listen to it.
Exactly.
Or you're listening to somebody being interviewed, and it's really good. And one of two things happens. Either you pull up to the place where you're going, and you absolutely have to go in because you have an appointment, so you miss the end of it, or you're getting home and you drive around the block 2 or 3 times. So at least I would do that so I could finish the interview. Well, the radio station started doing podcasts. So if I like sports talk, and Tom Tolbert on KNBR is interviewing Steve Kerr, the Warrior coach, I can listen to it when it happens, or I can listen to it when I'm out for a walk. And then if in the middle of the walk I see a friend of mine, I can turn off the interview, talk with my friend, and then get back right where I left off. Podcasting is like the greatest thing in the world. And then I found out that anybody can do it. All you need, basically, you could do a podcast, and this is the only device you need, your cell phone. So I started doing podcasts. I was passionate, and I still am, about helping people who disagree politically find common ground. So I would interview people on that. And then Toastmasters is known for public speaking, but they're also a leadership organization. So I did a 6-week series on leadership, and I got to interview different Toastmasters leaders. I got to interview Michael Notaro, who was an international president of Toastmasters. And then I got to interview Mayor Ashcraft, the mayor of Alameda. And then one day I went to church, and one of our lay leaders, she's active in the church. She's not ordained, but she's an important member that gives sermons once in a while. She talked about forgiveness. So I thought, what if I did a series on forgiveness? So her name is Jen. I interviewed Jen, and then I interviewed the rabbi in Alameda, Temple Israel, Rabbi Koch, and she talked about forgiveness from the point of view of the Jewish religion. And then there's an Islamic cultural center in Alameda, and I interviewed Iman Sheikh about forgiveness in the view of the Islamic faith. And then I interviewed a friend of mine, Savita, is an active and devout Hindu, and she introduced me to the leader of her Hindu place of worship. And he talked about forgiveness. And I'm sitting there saying, we've got all these wars going on involving religion, and yet they all agree on forgiveness, that when we give somebody forgiveness, we benefit as much or more than the person we're forgiving, because it's a great burden. It's a huge burden to hold a grudge. And if we could forgive somebody and get rid of the grudge, we benefit as much or more than the person we're forgiving. So that was incredible. And then after that, I did different things on sports, youth sports in Alameda, athletes that came out of Oakland. And now for the last year, we've done a podcast on Negro League baseball. And that was a baseball that African Americans played when they were excluded from the major leagues. So it's been.
I really enjoyed that series. That's just been incredible. Some of my favorite topics was, of course, the one with where you talked about Willie Mays, and then your speech on Jackie Robinson. Maybe you can just say a few things about some interesting people that you met, and just the process of touching base with all of these people, Josh Gibson, and some of those stories that and the people that connected you with those families.
Well, that's the beautiful thing right now in the world we live in. I call it the golden age of self-expression, because we can find anybody. Everybody's available, basically. Next week, I'm going to interview the daughter of a Negro League ball player. Norman Turkey Stearns was a ball player, and his daughter is Rosalind Stearns Brown, and she's in Detroit. 20 years ago, I'd have never located her. But with social media the way it is, social media gets all crazy sometimes with how we use it. But when we use it properly, and when we use it for good, we can get a message to somebody anywhere in the world and connect. And Rosalind's going to be in Detroit. I'm going to be in Alameda. We're going to talk on Zoom, and then I'll release it on the podcast. She wrote this book. Fans called him Turkey. I called him Dad.
Oh, wow.
And that's the other thing about the world we live in now. If we read a book, no matter what it is, there's a good chance we can find the author on LinkedIn. Send them a direct message, and every once in a while they'll say yes. So and so I've met a lot of people, and it hasn't been a money-making endeavor, but it's the best education I've ever gotten.
Yeah, it's just amazing how we all got closer connections, and you hear about all the bad things about social media on the news and whatnot, but there are so many good things that bring us closer together and keep
Well, that
we
was the
have a
intent.
tight-knit family.
Yeah, that was the intent. Not only for somebody that wants to do a podcast, but I'm connected with cousins that live in Italy that I, we'd still be cousins and we'd still love each other like family, but now we can communicate on a regular basis on, Facebook chats or whatever.
So, Steve, where do you think you want to go from here with the podcasting and all the skills that you've developed here?
That's a good question. The podcasting I want to continue because the subjects that we can talk about they're infinite. And that I'd like to continue. My next step is spreading the word through public speaking. I've been to Rotary clubs, Toastmasters clubs, churches. At my Methodist church in Alameda, Twin Towers United Methodist, on the first Sunday of Black History Month, I got the opportunity to do the sermon on Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And so I'd like to speak in community organizations, service clubs, religious organizations, and youth groups to talk about Negro League Baseball. And then also some subjects I talk about are self-expression and taking care of our mental well-being. So I'll take any opportunity to spread the word on that.
So, Steve, where can people get a hold of you?
Email is the simplest way, and I'll give it to you now, and you can put it in the show notes if you like. In fact, I'll tell you what. I'm going to rename myself. We're going to keep Steve up there, and I'm going to write my email address. That look right? That's it.
That's awesome.
So email me. Another beautiful thing about the world we live in now is sure I can come and speak with you in person if you're in and around Alameda and the San Francisco Bay Area. But if you're anywhere in the world and you would like me to speak virtually, I can speak on Zoom or whatever platform your organization uses, and I'd love to work with you.
Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure talking to you and having you on the show. It's been Mornings with Michael. We'll have some notes up there to where to get in touch with Steve as well. But Mornings with Michael is brought to you for informational, educational, and performing arts is our focus on this one, I guess you would say. We're glad that you have joined us, and we'll put more information about Steve, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we talk about the markets. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Keep going after your goals and keeping your activities like Steve has done here, and you'll get to where you want to go.